I'll sing it.
The Speaker at Prayer.
Almighty God, by whom alone kings reign and princes decree justice, and from whom alone cometh all counsel, wisdom, and understanding, we thine unworthy servants, here gathered together in thy name, do most humbly beseech thee to send down thy heavenly wisdom from above, to direct and guide us in all our consultations. And grant that we, having thy fear always before our eyes, and laying aside all private interests, prejudices, and partial affections, the result of all our counsels may be to the glory of thy blessed name, the maintenance of true religion and justice, the safety, honor, and happiness of the Queen, the public weal, peace, and tranquility of the island, and the uniting and knitting together of all the hearts of all persons and estates within the same, in true Christian love and charity, one towards another, through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen.
Please be seated. This Honourable House now resume its sitting. Call of the roll.
Mr. Witter, Mr. Smith, Mr. Holness, Mr. Shaw, Dr. Chang, Mr. Samuda, Mr. Montague, Ms. Grange, Mr. Henry, Mr. Bartlett, Mr. Mackenzie, Mr. Chuck, Mr. Darrell Vaz, Mr. Warmington, Mrs. Robinson, Mr. Hutchinson, Dr. Wheatley, Dr. Tufton, Mrs. Malahoo Fort, Mr. Spencer, Mrs. Williams, Mr. Green, Mr. Arscott, Mr. Azan, Dr. Bloomfield, Mr. Brown, Mr. Buchanan, Mr. Bunting, Dr. Campbell, Mr. Campbell, Mr. Clark, Mrs. Cuthbert Flynn, Miss Daly, Mr. Daly, Mrs. Dalrymple Philibert, Mr. Fagan, Dr. Ferguson, Dr. Green, Dr. Guy, Miss Hannah, Mr. Hales, Mrs. Holness, Mr. Hilton, Mr. Jackson, Mr. Kelly, Mr. Mean, Dr. McNeil, Miss Nita, Mr. Paulwell, Mr. Phillips, Dr. Phillips, Mr. Pickersgill, Mr. Redman, Mr. Robertson, Mr. Robinson, Mr. Stewart, Mr. Terlong, Reverend Thwaites, Mr. Dwayne Vaz, and Mr. Wright.
Statements by ministers. Announcements.
Laid on the table of the House today are the following: the annual report on audited financial statements of the Clarendon Alumina Production Limited for the financial year 2015-2016. Appropriation accounts, head 2622 Police Department for the year 2013-2014, head 2622 Police Department for the year 2014-2015, head 1600B Office of the Cabinet 2013-2014, head 2826 Family Court for the year 2010-2011, head 2653 the Passport Immigration and Citizenship Agency for the year 2012-2013, and head 2012 the Jamaica Customs Agency for the financial year 2012-2013.
Bills brought from the Senate.
The following is a message from the President of the Senate to the Honourable House of Representatives. I have the honor to advise the Honourable House of Representatives that on the 7th day of July 2017, a bill entitled an act to provide for special measures for upholding and preserving the rule of law, public order, citizen scrutiny, citizen security, and public safety within certain geographically designed areas of Jamaica and for connected matters was passed in the Senate with 13 amendments, for which the Honourable Senate desires the concurrence of this Honourable House. Signed, Thomas Tavares, Vincent QC, CDJP, President of the Senate. The amendments are circulated.
Mr. Speaker, on behalf of the Prime Minister, I now move that the Senate amendments to the bill, shortly entitled the Law Reform Zones of Special Operations, Special Security and Community Development Measures Act 2017, be considered and approved. The amendments were circulated, members.
Those in favour?
Aye.
Those against? Ayes have it. Petitions. Papers. Reports from committees. Notices of motions given orally.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to give notice that at the next meeting of the House, I will move to introduce and have read a first time a bill shortly entitled the Road Traffic Temporary Ticket Amnesty Act 2017. Mr. Speaker, I further beg to give notice that at a later stage today, I will move for the suspension of the standing orders to enable me to take the first reading of the bill and to take it through all its concluding stages.
Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I beg to give notice that at the next meeting of the House, I will move the following motions. Be it resolved that the report of the Regulations Committee of the House of Representatives and its deliberation on the radio and telegraph amateur radio service amendment regulation 2017, which was laid on the table of the House on the 28th of June 2017, be approved. Be it resolved that the report of the Regulation Committee of the House of Representatives and its deliberations on the telegraph control radio operations technician amendment regulations 2017, which was laid on the table of the House on the 28th day of June 2017, be approved.
Questions and answers to questions.
Mr. Speaker,
Minister.
the Minister of Finance will answer the question number 4, asked by the member from East Kingston, Port Royal.
Mr. Paulwell.
Mr. Speaker, I now ask the Minister of Finance to answer question number 4.
Mr. Speaker, question
Mr.
1.
Shaw.
Who are the owners of the South Jamaica Power Plant Company? Answer. The South Jamaica Power Plant Company, SJPC, is owned by the Jamaica Public Service Company Limited, Marubeni Corporation, Korea East-West Power, and the Government of Jamaica through its nominee, the Petrocarib Development Fund. Question 2. Please state whether or not the SJPC will be establishing the 190 megawatt generating plant in Old Harbour. Response. SJPC will be constructing a 192.6 megawatt combined cycle power plant, which is expected to replace 292 megawatts of heavy fuel oil power stations in the areas of Old Harbour and Hunts Bay. Construction of the facility is scheduled for 2 years, and I should indicate that the groundbreaking has already taken place. Question 3. Please state whether or not the Petrocarib Development Fund will be providing financing for the new 190 megawatt power generating plant, and what role, if any, will the Petroleum Corporation of Jamaica, PCJ, have in the project? Response. The SJPC project is financed through a combination of debt and equity financing. Cabinet approved the exercise of the Government of Jamaica's option to acquire a shareholding equity in SJPC through its nominee, the Petrocarib Development Fund. Details of the loan. The Board of Directors of the Petrocarib Development Fund approved a loan of US $15 million to the Petroleum Corporation of Jamaica to finance its participation in the South Jamaica Power Company Limited loan syndication facility for the construction of the 192.6 megawatt combined cycle gas turbine power plant. An equity position of US $13.24 million in the South Jamaica Power Company, SJPC, to finance its 10% shareholder contribution. Please provide, question 4, please provide an update on the proposed sale of the government's shares in the Jamaica Public Service Company. Answer. The Government of Jamaica affirms its support for the privatization of the 20% holding of ordinary shares in the Jamaica Public Service Company and is currently exploring further details with regard to the options for and timing of the privatization. The preference that the government does have in this respect is to put the shares on the stock market for the opportunity for Jamaicans to participate in the ownership at its widest level.
Mr. Speaker, I have some follow-up questions for the Minister. Minister, you mentioned that 292 megawatts of capacity in Old Harbour is to be replaced. Could you say what is the Government of Jamaica's shareholding in that 292 megawatt capacity?
The existing ownership would be 20% of what exists now outside of that 192.5 megawatts.
So what I'm hearing you to be saying, Minister, is that this 292 megawatts of capacity will be removed and taken out of the system in 2 years' time. Right? Right. And to be replaced by 190, in which the government of Jamaica will be owning not 20% of the 292, but 10% of the 190. That's all?
That is correct. But bear in mind that it's a separate vehicle under a separate ownership structure.
The point I'm trying to just get across is that very shortly, out of the 292 that we are earning because we have equity at 20%, that is going to become scrap metal. And in this new arrangement, where I believe the option was available for the government to retain a similar equity as the 20% in JPSCO, the government of Jamaica has opted for 10%. Would you agree that, well, first of all, could you say what is the duration of the license that has been given for the 190 megawatt plant?
This is a standard 20 years, advised by the minister.
And there are certain guarantees that are given in relation to the sale of the purchase of the electricity from this 190 plant.
Yes.
So it makes it a very safe investment for the investors in this investment.
That's correct.
So why would the government not want to retain 20% of this safe investment for 20 years rather than to opt for 10% of the safe investment for 20 years?
Well, in part because of the limitations of the cash that would be available through the PDF. But in addition to that, the government has signaled that we are looking towards exiting from the ownership of the substantive ownership. So it's a path towards exit.
Minister, I see that the PDF is investing 15 million, which is more than the 13 million US that is required for the 10%. But you've just mentioned that the government doesn't have the amount that would equate to 20% to invest. So what is the additional money that the PDF is, why are you investing 15 million, which is about 2 million above the 13 that is required for the 10%?
Now being advised that the amount that was original amount that was actually requested was 15 million. So far, we have paid out only 13.2 million.
So you're saying that the 10% of the equity in this facility is 13.2 million.
Dr. Wheatley.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As stated here, the equity position is that of $30.24 million in the special vehicle South Jamaica Power Company. And initially, they were asking for up to $15 million, but based on the actual amount of money to cover the 10% shareholding shares in this, it's 30.24.
Mr. Paulwell.
Minister, I'm not too clear. Who will be the shareholders in this? Who will be acting on behalf of the government of Jamaica? Is it, I need to understand, the money is being paid by one entity, but another entity is to hold the shares. I just want to be clear on that.
The PCJ, member, if you look at the the printout, the board of directors of the PDF approved the loan to finance to the PCJ to finance its participation in the South Jamaica Power Company Limited. So it is the PCJ who actually will be our representative.
Yeah. Mr. Speaker, just three more questions to the Minister of Finance. In the final question, he mentioned that the privatization of the GOJ's 20% is on stream. Would you concede that this reduction of, this removal of 292 megawatts of the JPSCO capacity will render that sale or privatization meaningless in terms of the value of the shares that the government has in JPSCO? That is, anybody who is aware of this removal, diminution of the value of JPSCO, that the government shares, which is 20% of that value, that there will not be a successful sale because there's no value left when you take out this 292 megawatts of capacity.
Well, I don't think it's fair for you to suggest that there's no value left. What do you really mean by that? Are you saying that without those 292 megawatts, JPS is of no value?
Mr. Speaker, I know that the Minister is not the Minister of Energy, right, but the Minister is aware that in addition to the 190 megawatts, the government of Jamaica has signed an agreement for Jamalco to add, I think, 100 megawatts. Plus you have Jamaica Energy Partners. They have about 120 megawatts. You have JPPC with another 60 or so megawatts. So what JPSCO is contributing today to the grid is this 292 megawatts plus the Bogue plant in Montego Bay. So when you take out this 292, you're pretty much leaving JPSCO out of a total amount of 500 and odd megawatts of capacity. You're leaving JPSCO with about 120 until the 190 plant comes in. But, Mr. Speaker, that 190 plant is not JPSCO. It is a South Jamaica power plant in which the government of Jamaica will only have 10%. The point I'm making is that the 20% that we now own in JPSCO will be of little value. But we are not retaining that value in the Southern Jamaica power plant, and we do have that opportunity to do so.
Remember, just to clarify, just to shed some more light. No, I agree with you that the replacement of the 292 out in Old Harbour by the 190 would effectively see a reduction in terms of the percentage holding of the government of Jamaica, if you look at it from a capacity perspective. But one needs to also look at it from an efficiency perspective. Right? No, not profit. The efficiency first. Let's deal with efficiency. So you are taking out 292 of, as you mentioned earlier, scrap metal, and putting in place, using your own words, scrap metals, and putting in place a more efficient, modern system producing 190. Now, we are owning 10% in that 190, but remember, we still own 20% of the entire JPS, who is responsible for T&D. Right? So in terms of, if JPS should make any profit at the end of the day, the government of Jamaica, as it is right now, will retain 20% of that profit, irrespective of where we are getting the electricity, whether from a private power company or some other IPP. So the reality is that, yes, this 190, this special vehicle, we only have 10%. So in fact, from a nominal perspective in terms of wattage, then we would own a lesser percentage. But one needs to also consider the efficiencies component. Again, also the fact that we are now diversifying our fuel source. And you will recall our commitment to the national energy policy. So we have to look at it from a multi-dimensional perspective rather than having a one-track mind thinking about the wattage that we are changing out. But also from an efficiency perspective, the fact that we are diversifying our fuel source and that we are also using a cleaner source of fuel.
Mr. Speaker, I just heard such a voucher remark from a colleague of mine, which is quite true. Nobody is understanding what we are saying. And I want to be precise. Minister, firstly, we own 20% of JPS today, 20% of that value. And we are taking out of it 292 megawatts of value. We're reducing the value. We have an opportunity to own 20% of the new capacity. Hold on. We have selected to own 10% of that. So it means that we are diminishing the value of the Jamaican people in this facility of generating electricity. So I want to make that point explicitly. And Mr. Speaker, I will bring back a motion for us to debate this because I think it is worthy of some debate because I believe that the government of Jamaica ought to find the resources to take up the 20% that's available, to retain its value so that when you divest, and we are supporting divestment, but the timing is everything. Can I just ask Ms. Minister, in relation to this 190 megawatts, what is the price of electricity that will be sold to the grid?
Mr. Shaw, your deputy minister. Dr. Wheatley, if you are assisting the Minister of Finance.
Mr. Speaker, I know where the member is going, and the member knows for a fact that it is lower than what the LNG facility. Well, I'm trying to get the number. I don't want to be misquoted, but I must say that it is 12. It is less than the 12.89 that LNG is supplying to Bogue, at the Bogue facility. I don't know the exact number. I don't remember the exact number. But I know it is cheaper based on the fact that the agreement speaks to more volume in terms of LNG, the lower the price to JPS.
Mr. Speaker, there is in fact a benchmark price which was established some time ago of 12.89, but because of the volume that is expected, yes, but I think the Jamaican people have a right to know this formally. Minister, can I get an idea from you in relation to any new capacity? You mentioned this 190. Are you aware of any new capacity based on future demand? And what is the government's view on that in light of the change in technology now, especially for renewables?
Okay. Philip, I never just asked for the question. Dirk. Member, could you repeat that question for me, please?
Mr. Speaker, I'm trying to ascertain. Now that there is approval for this 190, and there are approvals for Jamaica and elsewhere, what is the plan for further expansion, for further new generation to come on stream?
So I'm glad you asked that question, member, that currently we are wrapping up an IRP which will more or less be the blueprint that we're going to use to guide us going forward, for us to get an understanding of the demand, the projected demand, the current demand, projected demand, and also the capacity of the grid. We are committed to incorporating more renewables into the energy mix. With the recent commissioning of the solar facility out at Clarendon and the expected commissioning of the 37 megawatts out at Westmoreland as a result of the 8 Rivers project, that we are well on target to move up the original 20% of our electricity coming from renewable sources by 2030. And the government has now developed a policy, taken a decision that we are working with 30% by 2030. And that's our 1330 policy. But I must inform this House that based on the preliminary information coming to us, in fact, the grid cannot accommodate more than 30% renewables. But we are awaiting the, I'm awaiting the draft IRP report. Well, I'm awaiting the IRP to better guide us as to how we proceed.
Mr. Shaw.
Thanks for accommodating the Minister with responsibility for energy in answering the question. Thank you.
Mr. Speaker, thank you. At the expiry of 21 days, I crave the answer to the following questions directed first to the Minister of Justice and second to the Minister of Finance and the Public Service.
Member, go ahead.
Mr. Speaker, through you to the House Leader, I've asked the Prime Minister some questions since March of this year, and I'm yet to get an answer.
Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister made the statement here that the questions asked by that member cannot be answered here because it's an issue in court at the moment. There's an issue? Yes, it did. The day we were trying to set up the schedule for the answer to the question. That statement was made. But there's an issue relevant to the questions where information relating to that member was released from one area or section that is supposed to be confidential, where filing of members are to be kept confidential and not released to another. And the information that he submitted were released unauthorized to another agency, and I spoke to the clerk today and intend to get to the bottom of it, to find out by what authority that agency, which is a subject of Parliament, released that information to the Contractor General.
Motions that may be made at the commencement of public business requiring notice.
Mr. Speaker, I've heard what the House Leader has to
Members,
say.
please.
I've heard what the House Leader has to say. Is it that he has declaratively pointed out that the Prime Minister will not be answering the members' questions, but he will be answering a part of it?
The member who... Order.
I said, Mr. Speaker, that we have already dealt with question and answer to question. If the member so wishes, you have to ask for recommittal. It's as simple as that. You do not have an understanding. Please listen and allow her to hear what I'm saying. It's not my fault that you never understand.
Minister,
is
I do not wish at this stage to call names.
Mr. Speaker, may I ask for a recommitter?
The member who asked the question got an answer. The question is not for debate. And he's satisfied with the answer he got. And we are on another item at this stage. Motions that may be made at the commencement of public business requiring notice. Motions relating to the sitting of the House.
Mr. Speaker.
Go ahead, Mr. Twait.
Mr. Speaker, you broke the door for the commencement of this sitting this afternoon at 5 minutes to 3. I am fully aware of how busy you are and how busy other members are. But I'm wondering, particularly as we have representatives of our teachers' colleges, these are people who will have to insist upon punctuality in their day-to-day work. Is there a change in the time for the commencement of the sitting of the House? And could you appraise me as to whose responsibility it is to see that we start at 2 o'clock?
The member has asked a question of the Speaker. Member, in answer to your questions, members were here before 2 o'clock. Members requested of the Speaker to have certain discussions before the House starts, and the Speaker gave that assurance. And so when they were finished, the House was called in order. Members were here before 2 o'clock. I was here from 10 a.m. And when they advised me they were ready, even me, I had a meeting with some of the members of the House. And so I understand your position, but I'm sure you understand the Speaker's position.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. May I just... Lack of punctuality is not a feature that will take us to our 2030 vision, or to prosperity or progress. And I'm pleased for your assurance that we will try to be more punctual in the future. Thank you, sir.
Members, to answer the member, Mr. Twait, to answer your question and to comment on your commentary. Members are not only asked to be here, members are asked to stay in Parliament. A number of people come to Parliament and leave very early, well before the business of the House is finished. And I'm asking members to take, I'm asking members to take the business of the Parliament seriously. And you are to get here on time, do the people's business, and when the House is adjourned, you can go home. Thank you.
Roddy, you lose that one.
Motions for leave to introduce bills.
It's probably a typographical matter, but this is probably an appropriate point to raise it. On the order paper, it has the Minister of Justice to move at item 19 on the order paper. Item 19 on the order paper. In fact, 18, 19, and 20. It says the Minister of Justice to move that a bill entitled an act to amend the Betting, Gaming and Lotteries Act, be now read a second time, an act to amend the Civil Aviation Act, and an act to amend the Tourism Enhancement Act. I believe it is an error, Mr. Speaker. I just want to have it confirmed, because the bills are over the name of the Minister of Finance. So could I ask that it be corrected in subsequent order papers so we we are not subject to the printer's devil, because there are sufficient devils in the house that we don't need to have the printers added to it.
Thank you, Member. I'll so direct the technical. We are back at motion for leave to introduce bills. Presentation of bills without leave of the House first obtained.
Mr. Speaker, I now move for the suspension of the standing orders to enable me to take the first reading of the bill, shortly entitled the Road Traffic Temporary Ticket Amnesty Act of 2017.
Those in favor?
Aye.
Those against? Ayes have it. Clerk will read the bill.
A bill shortly entitled the Road Traffic Temporary Ticket Amnesty Act 2017, read of time.
Thank you very much, Madam Clerk. Mr. Speaker, I beg to give notice of second reading of the bill.
Members, before we proceed to public business, I wish to ask you to recognize the presence of a number of visitors, and particularly those from the Shortwood Teachers College. We welcome them to Parliament. Thank you. Public business.
Mr. Speaker, on the public business, we have a few items to take, but at this time, we'll ask the Minister of National Security take the traffic amendment, the traffic amnesty legislation first.
Mr. Speaker, I crave your indulgence as you proceed with matters on the public business. You will recall, Mr. Speaker, that about 2 months ago when I moved on the public business to withdraw the banking services amendment bill standing in my name, I indicated then that within about 2 to 3 weeks it should be retabled. And you, I presume, Mr. Speaker, may have been yourself quite anxious how that has not happened since then. As you are aware from discussion, there has been delay in that completion of the redrafting by the Legislative Council. My understanding is that by next week, Thursday, that redrafting should be completed and be ready for retabling. And I might also advise, Mr. Speaker, that as I indicated previously, I had sought support from the Attorney General's Chamber and the Ministry of Justice to assist with, provide technical assistance in that drafting exercise, which was never forthcoming. I have engaged the services of a former Chief Parliamentary Counsel to provide that technical support, to which should be reflected in the work that is finally retabled. And I make particular mention of that, Mr. Speaker, so that the pertinent entities will be aware that the bill so tabled would be the beneficiary of that support.
Member, we had a meeting on the matter. We had discussion on the matter. And we were explained to by the persons who are involved in it. I cannot assure you that it will be ready for next week. I join you in making a request that it be ready as early as possible. But I cannot assure you because of the amount of bills that may come before the House. And I've asked that some priority be given to your bill.
Mr. Speaker, I'm a bit saddened by that remark, quite frankly. because it was my understanding that it was against the background of all else that the next week, Thursday timeline was given. It was not plucked out of the thin air and put forward. So I'm a bit distressed to hear that. And I might add, Mr. Speaker, that the matters to be dealt with by the House are all matters of national importance. And I would presume that there is an appreciation of the urgency of completing this matter. And for all else that have to be done, it will be treated with the requisite priority that it deserves.
Mr. Jackson, from where I sit at this stage, I will join in asking that urgency be put on it, but I cannot guarantee you, based on information I have, that it will be ready for next week. I can assure you that some action has been put to it, and it should come as quickly as possible. Public Business Minister of National Security.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I would like to open the debate on the bill entitled the Road Traffic Temporary Ticket Amnesty Act of 2017 and to seek for the House's consideration and approval of the said bill. Mr. Speaker, the objective of the bill is to enhance revenue administration and collection, to afford persons an opportunity to clear their driving records before the enactment of the...
Minister, will you hold a minute for me, please? You should seek suspension of the standing order, and the House will move with you. So will you go ahead before you proceed on your presentation?
Mr. Speaker, I actually did, but I will do it again. We'll move for the suspension of the standing orders to enable me to take the second reading of the bill entitled the Road Traffic Temporary Ticket Amnesty Act of 2017.
Those in favor? Those against? As of it. Minister.
Thank you again, Mr. Speaker. Yes, Mr. Speaker, and let me also thank the members of the House for their graciousness. The objective of this bill, Mr. Speaker, that I'll be laying for consideration and approval is to enhance the revenue administration and collection and to afford persons an opportunity to clear their driving record before the enactment of the new Road Traffic Act. It is also to improve the efficiency of the courts and to reduce the amount of cases before our courts. This will be achieved, Mr. Speaker, by granting an amnesty for a period of 3 months from August 2, 2017 to October 31st, 2017. This will affect tickets issued from September 1, 2010 to July 31st, 2017. Presently, Mr. Speaker, the data shows that the outstanding traffic tickets in the courts total a sum of $2,283,841,900 Jamaican dollars. Additionally, repeat, $2,283,841,900. Additionally, the records of the Inland Revenue Department shows that there is $565,925,300 Jamaican dollars in outstanding tickets as of December 31st, 2016. As such, Mr. Speaker, this amnesty will seek to facilitate the collection of these monies for the public purse. A total of $2.8 billion is outstanding between those at the tax office and those before the courts. Mr. Speaker, to ensure the collection of these monies, the Ministry of National Security intends to conduct a public education campaign via radio, print, social media, television, with the focusing primarily to the target audience. We will conduct a series of briefing meetings with key stakeholders including the Jamaica Constabulary Force, the Ministry of Justice, the Tax Administration, and the Court Management Division. We will provide additional cashier stations and security personnel that will be required to manage the anticipated large influx of motorists on peak days during the amnesty at the offices of the Tax Administration of Jamaica. Mr. Speaker, the bill will facilitate the suspension of the relevant sections of the Road Traffic Act to enable motorists holding unpaid traffic tickets that have become a matter before the courts to pay them at the offices of tax administration, and these tickets that were issued from September 1, 2010 to July 31, 2017. This bill will also suspend the relevant sections of the Parish Courts Act and the Justice of the Peace Act, thereby preventing the issuance of warrants by a parish court judge or a justice of the peace for the arrest of traffic ticket holders. The bill will also seek to facilitate motorists holding unpaid traffic tickets that are offered an amnesty in relation to the penalty points being recorded against their driver's license. And motorists who receive tickets during the period of the amnesty will also enjoy a waiver of penalties outside of the fines, for example, points against their driver's license, so long as the payment is made within the amnesty period. In other words, Mr. Speaker, if during the amnesty period you are issued a ticket, we will still waive the points as long as you pay for that ticket within the amnesty period. Noteworthy, Mr. Speaker, is that during the amnesty, motorists will have the option of contesting their tickets in the courts. However, a motorist will be required to abide by the decision of the court and cannot thereafter utilize the amnesty offer. Additionally, motorists who do not avail themselves of the amnesty will be vigorously pursued by the strong arm of the law after the amnesty period is concluded. Mr. Speaker, we will now turn my attention to a clause-by-clause examination of the bill. Mr. Speaker, the short title of the bill is stated in Clause 1 as the Road Traffic Temporary Ticket Amnesty Act of 2017. In Clause 2 is the interpretation clause, which defines critical terms used throughout the bill, such as amnesty, which refers to the relief provided in the form of A, the non-conviction of a motorist who have paid his or her outstanding traffic ticket, the non-demerit points being recorded against driver's license of motorists, and no warrants being issued for qualifying persons. The amnesty period, which means August 2, 2017 to October 31, 2017. A critical term defined in Clause 2 is the commencement date, and this is defined as being August 2, 2017. D, Minister, is also defined as the Minister with responsibility for national security. And E, outstanding traffic penalty, means the fixed penalty in respect of an offence to which Section 116 of the Road Traffic Act relates. These would have been issued during the period commencing September 1, 2010 and ending on July 31, 2017. And qualifying person who is defined as a person who has received a traffic ticket and did not pay their fines. Clause 3, amnesty, and states that notwithstanding any provision to the contrary, a qualifying person can pay for outstanding traffic tickets and is entitled to relief. Clause 4 speaks to the scope of the amnesty and the relief that a qualifying person is entitled to during its duration. Clause 4 also, Mr. Speaker, speaks to where you can make the payments, whether tax administration or any other entity designated by the minister. Clause 5 speaks to the duration of the bill and its expiration. It also provides for the amnesty period to be extended if necessary. The memorandum on objectives and reasons states that this bill seeks to enhance revenue administration and collection, also to afford persons an opportunity to clear their driving records, improve the efficiency That this bill will provide the motoring public with the opportunity to wipe their slates clean before the implementation of the new and more stringent Road Traffic Act, which will have greater penalties for those in breach. For example, Mr. Speaker, we have seen persons with hundreds upon hundreds of tickets that have not paid them, and this matter will be dealt with severely under the new act, and therefore we encourage all motorists to make use of the amnesty. It's on the floor. It's before the Parliament to conclude the debate. Mr. Speaker, it is for these reasons that I invite the members to give their support for the passing of this bill in the House before us today. Mr. Speaker, if it so pleases you. Thank you very much.
Mr. Bunting.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, this is the second amnesty in recent times. And I understand the reasons for coming with it. Today, what's a little more difficult to understand is why do we need to rush it through all its stages in the same afternoon that it's tabled? I mean, a traffic amnesty doesn't seem to be that kind of emergency that it couldn't wait, that it couldn't sit for one day, especially given the fact that it doesn't start until October. August, ends in October. So, you know, but that will make a big issue of it, but it just shows a lack of planning in terms of bringing the legislation. Mr. Speaker, when I believe it was in 2012, in fact, I won't even take authorship. The bill had been tabled by my predecessor, Senator Nelson, and I think it was passed through the Senate. But because of the election in 2011, the amnesty actually occurred in 2012 when it was retabled in the House and eventually passed. And I recall, I think we collected something like $400 million, 383, approximately $400 million during that period. What was interesting, although that amnesty was a 6-month amnesty, the vast majority of that 380 million was collected in the last few days. And I hope that in the public education, I think we have to send a signal that people mustn't assume that it's going to extend it. Because if that is the case, they automatically wait until the last day. So I think the administration should undertake to start in their public information to encourage people to not wait until the last minute, because there is no guarantee of an extension if there is congestion. But, Mr. Speaker, what this amnesty points to, or intends in a sense to correct, is a larger problem that we have with the collection, well, with the whole administration and enforcement of the traffic ticket system. It's not a new problem. It has been with us for decades, really. And I noted that this amnesty covers the period, or it's relating to prescribed notices issued during the period commencing September 1st, 2010 forward, because I believe the last amnesty ended at that period in 2010 and covered a switchover of the traffic ticket system that we had. Yes. No, the amnesty took place in 2012, but it covered tickets issued up to, I think, just around the September 2010 when there was a new ticketing system that came into play. But what has always been challenging, and we spent, myself, Minister Davies, Minister Golding, and the Commissioner, the Tax Administration Department Commissioner, spent a number of afternoons trying to sort through. This is an unusual area because it straddles about at least 4 different ministries. The Ministry of Transport and its agencies, the Island Traffic Authority, the Traffic Authority, the Island Traffic Department, or what it's called, the Ministry of National Security through the GSCF, the Ministry of Justice in the whole, through the courts, primarily the traffic courts, Ministry of Finance through who actually does the collection. And I remember finding solutions were especially challenging because even while we debated, for example, the possibility of privatizing some parts of the process, the tax administration was very concerned that any interface with their system would potentially undermine the security of their whole tax collection system, and therefore they were not open to having any sort of consortium of private investors manage or play a role in managing this because they couldn't not securely, they weren't confident, they didn't want to risk any backdoor sort of access to their very secure system. So what I suggest, Minister, we've seen that the amnesties help particularly in revenue collection, help people with a fresh start, but they go back to their old habits. And until we can have a system that is effective in enforcing current traffic tickets or traffic ticket violations and enforce the penalties for not paying, then we'll continue to have, every few years, we'll have to have amnesties. So I'm going to suggest, and perhaps one of the parliamentary committees, I know once the Road Traffic Act is passed, it will address some of the shortcomings, update some of the levels of fines, etc., reduce the backlog in the courts, because then all tickets can still be settled, albeit with an extra payment through the tax office. But the system end-to-end still needs a seamless solution, one that interfaces from the point at which the officer issues a ticket through to however it is resolved, whether through the ticket collection at the tax department, or if it's resolved in the court, one way or the other. And I think we need to really enter upon that, finding that solution. Otherwise, this will be a recurring issue that the ministry will have to deal with and the parliament will have to deal with. Thank you. Yes, I'm supporting.
Mr. Choke.
Mr. Speaker, I would just like to add my support to this bill and to congratulate the ministry for bringing and updating the level of non-compliance. Because, Mr. Speaker, it is clear to me that about 35% of traffic violators or tickets have not been paid. The vast majority of them are probably still in the courts. And one of the features I believe that the minister will be bringing to this particular amnesty is that those persons who have not paid as yet and have not gone to court, that they can actually pay at the tax administration, but the facilities may be provided for them to pay at other payment outlets, and those payment outlets would then pay tax administration. Now, that is something that confronted me in 2011, because as Member Bunting indicated, the tax administration did not want to interface with the private collection agencies, so the various agencies. So, but this time it seems to me that tax administration has now worked up the protocol that they can, if it is paid at a private business place, the private business place can give a receipt, and the private business place can pay with the tax administration, and it will be recorded. Okay? What is important, Mr. Speaker, is that motorists who have violated the law in that period and who have not paid, that the tickets and the information is still outstanding. And what is more, Mr. Speaker, I understand from the traffic police that those who have not paid, they have in excess of 100,000 warrants. And what the minister is now saying, Mr. Speaker, is that those warrants will not be served and will be vacated once the payment is made. So it is very important to traffic violators around the island to appreciate that if they have not paid and they have not costed it in court, then they better pay, because warrants exist which can be served, but if they are paid, and the warrants will be vacated. What is more, I understand, Mr. Speaker, that provisions will be made for those persons who have traffic tickets and are unsure, that they will be able to call, and it will verify that, yes, you have paid or you have not paid. So that is important. Mr. Speaker, apart from those who have not paid and have not contested it, amazingly, 1 million tickets, 1.1 million tickets are being contested in the courts. 1.1 million over the last 5 or so years are being contested in the courts. And that, as the minister pointed out, amounts to $2.2, almost $2.3 billion. And those persons, Mr. Speaker, who have it in the courts, if they pay, if they change their plea and plead guilty, then, as the ministers pointed out, there will be no penalty. The demerit points will not be added onto their license. And I think, Mr. Speaker, this was one of the reasons why people actually sought to contest the tickets in the courts, because they were trying to avoid hope that they can win in the courts itself without a demerit. So the opportunity is there for the vast majority of them who went to court to contest it because of the demerit points, that if they go back to court during this period, they can change their plea to guilty and there will be no demerit points. They just have to pay up and that's it. Mr. Speaker, it's amazing that you can have 1.1 million tickets being contested. It means, Mr. Speaker, that there are many motorists with many dozens, hundreds of tickets. You know, because you don't have 1.1 million traffic violators in the courts. So it's a lot that these traffic violators, Mr. Speaker, have a lot of tickets, and the opportunity is now given to them by the minister to pay up. Otherwise, the court will definitely try these cases. And, Minister, I'm going to ask you, didn't even mention it to you in private or in cabinet, but I want to say, after this amnesty period, I'm going to ask you for some additional money to employ some additional parish court judges to go after those persons. The traffic violators, those who have violated the Traffic Act, must not be allowed to go free. So if they brought the matter to court, then it must be dealt with in the courts. And so the necessary provision will be put in place so that these persons can be dealt with. Because, you know, Mr. Speaker, there are about 5 parishes. There are about 5 parishes where the number of tickets are really significant. These are the outstanding tickets in some of these parishes. Clarendon has 61,000. Kingston has 143,000. St. Andrew has 295,000. St. Catherine, 201,000. And St. James, 91,000. All of these, Mr. Speaker, let the violators know that the courts will be going after them if they don't pay up during this amnesty period. So, Minister, may I say your full support in this matter. Traffic violators, take heed, avoid the demerit points, pay up now so that less burden on the courts, and also hopefully they can start respecting the laws on the roads.
Mr. Phillips.
Mr. Speaker, thank you. Mr. Speaker, you know, it's a little bit disappointing, though, that even though supporting your bill, Minister, that I would have thought that once the expiry date of October 2017 comes into effect, that we would have had the new road traffic bill passed in both houses, so that the amnesty that you're giving and those that would have started with 0 demerit points, that we would have had the bill in place, that we would have been able to start over anew. The road traffic bill, Mr. Speaker, has been sitting in the House for a little bit far too long. And in the minister from Central, the member from Central Clarendon's presentation in this House, in the debate, was that this amnesty would have been given so that once a new Road Traffic Act comes into play, that those who would have had multiple tickets, that there will be no rollover of any demerit points. And we, Mr. Speaker, disappointing because the bill was tabled sometime in 2015, came off the order paper because of the election, was retabled. The debate has started in the lower house and has not yet been completed in the lower house for some nearly 4 to 5 months now. So, you know, to see that the amnesty is coming into play and the bill is nowhere near completion is a bit disappointing. So just to urge the minister through here to urge his colleague that we do this together so that we can get this Road Traffic Act in play. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Henry.
Yeah, Mr. Speaker, the Minister of Transport and the Ministry supports and welcomes this presentation on the amnesty, which was, as the Minister Cross said, the opposition spokesperson, was part of the presentation we made during the budget or sectoral presentation. Unfortunately, the Chief Parliamentary Council Department has still not finished the work on the bill, and some 344, I think, changes, I was told, is what is being implemented. I did say that we intend to hasten that position, and I'm advised that we should be getting that from the Chief Parliamentary Council not very long from now, but I'm hoping before the end of this month that we'll be able to bring the new Road Traffic Act to the Parliament for approval. There is no doubt that what we are saying to the people is that there's a whole new approach to the transport, and that we're intending to ensure that we improve what is already in existence. In that context, we're wiping the slate clean. But at the same point in time, the new Road Traffic Act, it will, of course, create other areas that will impact on the motoring public. You have my assurance that as long as it's in my power to speed up the parliamentary comments, and I don't know if the legislative arm would like to say anything on it overall, but basically it's in the process, and I'm advised that we should, in the next 10 days or so, receive that for us to begin to bring the bill during this month and to implement it as soon as possible. I therefore support the bill, and I'm told the list of the amendments to move was delivered to the ministry today, so that we should be in a position to become more specific in the time frame, and if it's possible, before the end of this month.
Mr. Speaker, I would like to thank my colleagues who participated in this debate and to say that I agree with the member from Central Manchester and to assure him that we will be having a very vibrant and vigorous PR program. And we have actually started to inform the motoring public about the amnesty and how they can pay, because one of the features of having reviewed the former amnesty, the involvement of the private collection agencies is a new feature, so that persons don't have to rush the tax offices, and they can also access the tax office portal, which is online, so that there are more options for payment. And we are hoping that more and more persons will utilize these systems rather than staying and waiting until the last week and then rushing the tax offices all across the country. Yes, yes, yes. And we are setting up a hotline at Ellison Road where persons can call and check if they have outstanding tickets. And all the agencies, the system that we have working with, everybody is online. TAJ, the police, the Ministry of Justice, the courts. So once you pay, the update is seamless. And we are hoping that we will have it glitch-free throughout the amnesty period. But we have persons on standby to treat with any problems that there will be. The new traffic ticket management ticket system, where every agency is online, is actually in play right now. So that the tax office, the police, the courts, they are online. So once you update at one agency, all the other agencies see it automatically. The funds realized from this amnesty will go towards improving, well, to TAJ, to the Ministry of Justice for the courts, to invest in our court system to help with the digitalizing of records and improvement of courthouses, to make the backlog of the cases, to make the experience in our courts a lot better than it is today. The Ministry of Transport and, of course, the Ministry of National Security will get some of the funds for investment into our intelligence network, because this administration believes in the continuous investment into the intelligence network of the country. Other payment agencies, as we said, and Minister Chuck said, will be a part of this amnesty. We support the suggestion Minister Chuck made for more traffic courts, more access right across the island, so that persons who generate 300-400 tickets can be dealt with quickly by the court system, and we don't have to do another amnesty. I'm hopeful that this will be our last amnesty, because we are working with eGov Jamaica to sort out whatever glitches there are, so that as soon as the new Road Traffic Act is passed, there will be a seamless integration of the old management system and the new system. We are hopeful, Mr. Speaker, that the new Road Traffic Act will be passed before the end of this amnesty, and that the start-up date for that new act will be early in November. So once the amnesty is over, it is our wish that the new Road Traffic Act will take effect, and therefore I am making an appeal to the motoring public persons who have outstanding tickets. If you can't find the outstanding ticket, once this act is passed and we start the amnesty, there will be telephone numbers made available and websites where you can go and check up and make sure that you would have cleared your name and your driving record. Mr. Speaker, I commend this act to my colleagues in the House, the members of this Honourable House, and ask for their support, if it so pleases you, Mr. Speaker. For second reading, I am asking for the clerk for second reading of the bill.
The question is that the bill be read a second time. Those in favour? Those against? The ayes have it.
It's a long title. A bill entitled an act to enhance revenue administration and collection, afford persons an opportunity to clear their driving record, improve the efficiency of the court and reduce the number of cases in the court by granting an amnesty for a period commencing on August 2, 2017 and ending on October 31, 2017, or such further period as each House of Parliament may determine by resolution, to facilitate the payment of outstanding penalties relating to prescribed notices issued during the period commencing on September 1, 2010 and ending on July 31, 2017, under Section 1162 of the Road Traffic Act, and for connected matters, read a second time.
The House will now resolve itself into a committee of the whole House to consider the bill clause by clause. What is about the clause now?
Clause 1.
I put clause 1. Those in favour? Those against? The ayes have it. I put clause 2. Those in favour? Those against? The ayes have it. I put clauses 3 to 5. Those in favour? Those against? The ayes have it. I put the title and enacting clause. Those in favour? Those against? The ayes have it. The question is, I do report the bill as having passed committee stage without amendment. Those in favour? Those against? The ayes have it. I do report the bill as having passed committee stage without amendment. Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I thank you and the members of the committee for passing. May I ask that the bill be read a third time?
The question is that the bill be read a third time. Those in favour? Those against? As of it. Clerk.
A bill entitled an act to enhance revenue administration and collection, afford persons an opportunity to clear their driving record, improve the efficiency of the courts, and reduce the number of cases in the court by granting an amnesty for a period commencing on August 2, 2017 and ending on October 31, 2017, or such further period as each House of Parliament may determine by resolution, to facilitate the payment of outstanding penalties relating to prescribed notices issued during the period commencing on September 1, 2010 and ending on July 31, 2017 under Section 1162 of the Road Traffic Act and for connected matters, read a third time. And passed.
Mr. Speaker, I want to thank you, sir, and all the members, and to urge members of the public to make use of the amnesty. And if they get themselves in problems after the end of the amnesty, they can't call any member of this House for any help.
Mr. Speaker, the Minister of Finance will now deal with items 6, 13, 18, 19, and 20 listed under government business.
Order, please. Minister Warmington. Mr. Shaw.
Mr. Speaker, the first issue that I'd like to take is the Public Bodies Amendment Regulations 2017, which deals with the acquisition of shares by public bodies. Mr. Speaker, these regulations are tabled before this Honourable House and are made pursuant to Section 4 of the Public Bodies Management and Accountability Act and are subject to affirmative resolution. The regulations are critical to fulfilling the objectives of the Public Bodies Management and Accountability Act in providing guidelines and a framework to public bodies in respect of making equity investments given their potential risks. Mr. Speaker, the Public Bodies Amendment Regulations 2017 makes provisions in relation to the authority to acquire, hold, and dispose of shares, protocols regarding the acquisition of shares, limitations on the acquisition of shares, limitations on the value of shares to be held. The background of these regulations, Mr. Speaker, is that the Public Bodies Management and Accountability Act had once stipulated that public bodies shall not acquire shares without prior consultation with the minister, unless their primary business had included the acquisition of shares. In addition to this, the Act also stated that shares acquired by public bodies should be vested in the Accountant General in accordance with the Crown Property Vesting Act. This was changed in 2011, Mr. Speaker, by way of an amendment to the Public Bodies Management and Accountability Act, because public bodies as legal entities have the right to own property in their own name and do not need to vest in the Accountant General as do ministries, departments, and agencies which are not legal entities. In the interest of time, I will only mention the most salient provisions which form the essence of the regulations. The members would have had an opportunity to look at them. The regulations now before Parliament provide that, subject to the provisions of the Act and the regulations, a public body may acquire, hold, and dispose of shares as part of its investment portfolio. Regulation 21, subsection 1. Before the public body does so, however, it must obtain the approval of the minister unless the acquisition of shares is of companies listed on the Jamaica Stock Exchange. The acquisition of shares outside of the stock exchange can be done regionally and internationally. Most importantly, every public body shall put in place, maintain, and observe protocols regarding authorization levels, procedures, and controls for the acquisition, holding, and disposition of shares. There are important limitations on the acquisition of shares in order not to compromise a public body's ability to fulfill its mandate. A public body that acquires more than 50% of its funding from the consolidated fund shall not acquire shares without the approval of the minister. A public body shall not, without the prior approval of the minister, acquire shares in an entity that would give the public body a controlling interest in the entity. A public body shall only acquire the shares of an entity that possesses a tax compliance certificate. The value of all shares held by a public body shall not exceed 10% of the value of all investments, including shares held by the public body, unless the prior approval of the Minister is obtained. Mr. Speaker, these limitations are critical to enable protection in an environment where the potential risks are great. These limitations are also important to enhance or contribute to the effective use of funds to achieve the primary mandate of the entity. I move for the approval of these regulations which have been tabled, Mr. Speaker.
I'm not rushing anything. Keep quiet so you can hear so well.
Those in favor?
Aye.
Those against? As of it. Minister.
Mr. Speaker, the second matter before the Honourable House has to do with the de-earmarking of 3 public bodies and resulting in an act to amend the Betting, Gaming and Lotteries Act 2017, an act to amend the Civil Aviation Act 2017, an act to amend the Tourism Enhancement Act 2017. Mr. Speaker, the bills before the House today fulfills the objective of this government to de-earmark and redirect funds of the Jamaica Civil Aviation Authority, the Tourism Enhancement Fund and the Chase Fund to the Consolidated Fund on a permanent basis as part of an initial public financial management reform measure. It is important, Mr. Speaker, to ensure a degree of predictability of funding of the government's programs and activities and improve its ability to prioritize and allocate the resources to meet the country's needs. Mr. Speaker, as this Honourable House is aware, this government is making every effort to limit borrowing and levying new taxes to add to the already high tax burden of Jamaicans. The policy underlying this measure, therefore, is to de-earmark the funds of the Civil Aviation Authority, the Chase Fund, and the Tourism Enhancement Fund, which seeks to reduce the levels of earmarked funds to ensure that the budget for fiscal year 2017-18 and all future budgets are properly funded. I want to assure this Honourable House that the work that is undertaken by these agencies is valuable and will not be compromised in any way, as the government will not be seeking to impede or obstruct the mandates of these public bodies. Having regard to this, their activities will continue to be properly funded from the Consolidated Fund for their programmed expenditures to ensure that their functions can continue to be executed. As a demonstration of our commitment to this end, all 3 public bodies have already been programmed and funded through this year's budget, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the enactments that establish the 3 public bodies, when amended by these bills, will enable government to better optimize the use of government's resources. Mr. Speaker, in terms of a brief clause-by-clause examination, in an act to amend the Betting, Gaming and Lotteries Act, Clause 1 of the bill, entitled An Act to Amend the Betting, Gaming and Lotteries Act, addresses all preliminary issues in the bill. It establishes the short title and provides that the bill is to be read and construed as one with the principal act, the Betting, Gaming and Lotteries Act. In Clause 2, Mr. Speaker, it amends sections 31A, subsection 2 and B, and subsection B, and Clause 33, subsection 2B of the Principal Act, the Betting, Gaming and Lotteries Act. Section 31A, subsection 2B of the Principal Act provides that every non-promoter of pool betting shall make contributions from the weekly gross profits of the non-promoter of 2% to the Chase Fund. Section 33, subsection 2B of the Principal Act provides that every operator shall make contributions from their weekly gross profits of 1% to the Chase Fund. These two sections are amended by deleting the words Chase Fund and substituting in each case the words collector of taxes by the 7th day of each month. So those sums, Mr. Speaker, will flow to the collector of taxes instead of the Chase Fund. Clause 3 of the same bill, an act to amend the Betting, Gaming and Lotteries Act, amends Section 44A, subsection 4D of the Principal Act. Section 44A, subsection 4D provides that the operator of a gaming machine shall pay in respect of each machine specified in the license a contribution for the benefit of the fund established under Section 59F, 1% in the aggregate into the fund. The bill amends this section by substituting the words to the fund with the words to the collector, which wording is part of the scheme of the Act, and the words a contribution for the benefit of the fund established under Section 59F, and substituting the words a fee. Mr. Speaker, Clause 4 of the bill amends Section 49, subsection 3 of the Principal Act in a similar way. Clause 4 amends Section 49, subsection 3 by deleting the words for the benefit of the fund under Section 59F, monetary contributions, and substituting it with the words to the collector of taxes. Clause 5 amends Section 59F, subsection 3 of the Principal Act, Mr. Speaker. 59F establishes the Chase Fund and outlines as subsection 3 that contributions are required to be deposited into the fund by gaming machine licensees under Section 44A4 and lottery licensees under Section 49.3. As a result, Mr. Speaker, of the amendments proposed by this bill to amend the Betting, Gaming and Lotteries Act, these contributions will no longer go to the fund but be paid over to the collector of taxes. The amendment therefore states that the monies of the fund shall consist of such sums as may be provided by Parliament for the fund in the estimates of revenue and expenditure. So in other words, it will be part of the estimates for the operation of the fund, and should it need additional resources in the same way that other areas of the budget are amended by the supplementary estimates, this would be the case in this case. The Memorandum of Objects and Reasons indicates that this bill is a companion measure to the other two bills, the Civil Aviation Amendment Act and the Tourism Enhancement Amendment Act. It states the policy that guided the preparation of the amendment bill, namely to provide that monies currently payable to the Chase Fund are to be paid over to the collector of taxes, and the monies for the Chase Fund is to be provided for in the estimates of revenue and expenditure approved by Parliament. Mr. Speaker, in the bill entitled An Act to Amend the Civil Aviation Act, Clause 1 of this bill, entitled An Act to Amend the Civil Aviation Act 2017, addresses all preliminary issues and establishes the short title and provides that the bill is to be read and construed as one with the principal act, the Civil Aviation Act. Clause 2 amends Section 6A of the Principal Act, Mr. Speaker. Section 6A outlines the functions of the Civil Aviation Authority and provides, amongst other things, at subsection 2 thereof, that the authority may impose charges for the use of the facility or service provided by the authority. Clause 2 seeks to amend Section 6A by inserting after subsection 2 that revenues received from charges imposed under subsection 2 shall be paid into the consolidated fund within 7 days after receipt. Clause 3 of this bill amends Section 6D, paragraph F of the Principal Act by deleting paragraph F. Section 6D, paragraph F provides that funds and resources of the authority shall consist of revenues from charges imposed by the authority for use of any facility or services provided by it. With the changes contemplated here, revenue from charges imposed by the Civil Aviation Authority become payable to the consolidated fund and not to the authority. Clause 4 of the bill amends Section 61, subsection 2 of the Principal Act. This section and subsection provides that money standing to the credit of the authority may from time to time be invested in securities approved either generally or specifically by the minister, and the authority may from time to time, with the approval, sell all or any of such securities. The authority's powers to do this will not change, Mr. Speaker, save and except that the amendment proposed at Clause 4 seeks to delete the word monies and substitute the word subject to subsection 3, monies, and inserting a subsection 3 which provides that monies standing to the credit of the authority shall not include revenue payable to the consolidated fund under Section 6A, subsection 3. The Memorandum of Objects and Reasons indicates that this bill is a companion measure to the other two bills, the Betting, Gaming and Lotteries Act and the Tourism Enhancement Act. And finally, in respect of the Tourism Enhancement Act, Clause 1 of the bill addresses the preliminary issues. Clause 2 proposes to amend Section 7 of the Principal Act by renumbering the section as Section 7, subsection 1, and inserting a new subsection 2 that states that monies paid into the fund under subsection 1 shall be paid over to the collector of taxes within 7 days after the receipt. Section 7 of the Principal Act currently provides that monies collected by way of the tourism enhancement fees shall be paid into the fund. Clause 3 of the bill amends Section 10, paragraph E of the Principal Act by inserting next after the word fee the words "and paying the fee in accordance with Section 7." Section 10, paragraph E outlines the functions of the fund as including the collection of the tourism enhancement fee. Section 14, paragraph B of the Principal Act lists as amongst the financial resources of the fund the tourism enhancement fee. Clause 4 of the bill proposes to amend this section by deleting paragraph B. Clause 5, Mr. Speaker, seeks to clarify that when reference is made to the resources of the fund, these references will not include the fees to be paid over to the collector of taxes. Clause 6 amends the first schedule, paragraph 4, by deleting the words "out of the income of the fund" and inserting words that convey that the fund's projects, programs, and other expenses will be provided for from sums provided for the purpose of, as approved by Parliament. And of course, this too is taken in companion measures with the other two bills, Betting, Gaming and Lotteries Act and the Civil Aviation Act. Mr. Speaker, the passage of these bills is essential to ensure a degree of predictability to funding for the government's programs and activities, and I want to indicate that it has been a source of concern for some time that we really can't have a lot of little governments all over the place. You have one government, and you can't have a dispersal of funds, some of them building surpluses, while government has to come to Parliament to impose new taxes upon the people, while there are surpluses built up all over in accounts all across the network of government agencies. It is an inefficient form of governance, and therefore this is a fundamental first step, Mr. Speaker, that we are taking in the area of more efficient management of the country's resources. And so I move for the approval of these bills.
Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Bunting.
I think this is a move in the direction of better fiscal management of public affairs. The truth is, I recall a few years ago, someone bringing to my attention that when I was Minister of National Security, that the Civil Aviation Authority charged a security fee for travelers or to the airlines. I can't remember which one it was. But yet, the responsibility for security at the airports was exclusively or principally that of the JCF. And yet, none of those funds flowed to the JCF. And similarly, I recall many times having to approach the TEF for assistance to purchase police vehicles. And it didn't seem to make sense that the consolidated fund couldn't afford something which was a priority for the administration, and then you had to go to this mini Ministry of Finance to make representation to get funds for essential services. So I think this improves both the central control of the Ministry of Finance, but more importantly, the transparency of the spending and the oversight of this Parliament over the overall budget process. And therefore, I think it is something worthy of support. I have one question and 1 point on the approach, however. The question is, have we calculated any potential saving from the administration of these various funds, which will now have obviously less work to do that it's being consolidated at the ministry, and a lot of their investment type activities will no longer be necessary. Have we calculated how much savings we'll make from that function no longer being performed in a sort of satellite way? No. The point I'm making, if you have one pool being managed instead of 4 pools, you will need only 1 set of administrators rather than 4 sets. So I just want to understand if there is any savings coming from that. But and this measure, Minister of Finance, you could correct me if I'm wrong, but I think administratively it is already in operation since this, has it been in operation since the start of the fiscal year, this new approach? And the only caution, what I've heard is that some agencies which used to get, I don't know if subvention is the right word, but used to get funding directly from the TF, now that it goes to the ministry, comes back to the parent ministry, there is a lag coming from the parent ministry to the agency. So like the Jamaica Tourist Board, for example, for about 3 months in a row, they have been complaining that they are not getting their financial support in a timely way. Now this could be very well, just whenever you have a change of system, it takes a while, but my own experience is that central ministries tend to like to hold on to the funds and don't pass them through in a timely way to the ministry. So I just caution that perhaps through some sort of circular issued from the Ministry of Finance, that it should be clear that the funds that are sent, particularly for the budget of the agencies, shouldn't be rinsed by the parent ministry in the meanwhile. And with those few remarks, Mr. Speaker, we don't have any problem supporting this bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank the honourable member for his comments. The issue is we really haven't done a fine-tuned calculation of savings yet, but if you look at it from the point of view of cash flow, then you can see where, if to the extent that instead of the cash staying in different pockets all over the place, it's in the consolidated fund. So right away, it assists in the cash flow at the level of the consolidated fund. Absolutely. So from a treasury, that's right. From a treasury management point of view, it makes absolute sense. And this is where we're going to have to go with a lot of other companies. This is sort of using it as a pilot program, work out the kinks, and most certainly in the next fiscal year, we are targeting other companies that will be equally be earmarked in this way. You see, we have to remind ourselves, that there has been a proliferation of public bodies to the extent that some of them that have even lost their useful life are still gasping for breath, but have accounts that are in place all over right now. And at last count, we're over 200 public bodies outside of the central government. At last time I checked, Singapore had about 60. And their per capita income is US $55,000. And ours is 10% of theirs, and we have over 200 public bodies outside of central government. So I just want to point out that this is, in this pilot project, we are going to be working very carefully with our Director of the Budget at the Ministry of Finance to ensure that there is no delay between the disbursement of the funds to the parent ministries and that money getting on to get to do the work in the various agencies. We have to, if we have to put a czar on it, we put the czar on it to make sure that we don't have any kinks in that system, because the objective is not to disturb the very critical functions of these agencies, such as the TEF, the Civil Aviation, and the Chase Fund. It is for them to continue their work, but for the country and the budgetary process to benefit from this consolidation. Mr. Speaker, I move for the adoption of these bills. I move for the second reading.
The question is that the bills before us, as presented by the Minister of Finance, be read a second time. Those in favour? Those against? As of it. Clerk.
A bill entitled An Act to Amend the Betting, Gaming and Lotteries Act read a second time. A bill entitled An Act to Amend the Civil Aviation Act read a second time. A bill entitled An Act to Amend the Tourism Enhancement Act read a second time.
The House will now resolve itself into a committee of the whole House to consider these bills clause by clause. Minister, we will take the Act to amend the Betting and Gaming and Lotteries Act first. I put clause 1. Those in favour? Those against? The ayes have it. I put clause 2. Those in favour? Those against? The ayes have it. Minister, do you have any amendment? Members, I put clause 3. Those in favor? Those against? As of it. I put clause 4. Those in favor? Those against? As of it. I put clause 5. Those in favor? Those against? As of it. I put the title and enacting clause. Those in favor? Those against? As of it. The question is that I do report the bill as having passed without amendment. Those in favor? Those against? As of it. We are going to do the other two before we return to confirm at the top. We will do the amendment to the Civil Aviation Act. I put clause 1. Those in favor? Those against? As of it. I put clause 2. Those in favor? Those against? As of it. I put clause 3. Those in favor? Those against? As of it. I put clause 4. Those in favor? Those against? As of it. I put the title and enacting clause. Those in favor? Those against? As of it. The question is that I do report this bill as having passed committee stage without amendment. Those in favor? Those against? As of it. I will now deal with the amendment to Tourism Enhancement Act. I put clause 1. Those in favor? Those against? As of it. I put clause 2. Those in favor? Those against? As of it. I put clause 3. Those in favor? Those against? As of it. I put clause 4. Those in favor? Those against? As of it. I put clause 5. Those in favor? Those against? As of it. I put clause 6. Those in favor? Those against? As of it. I put the title and enacting clause. Those in favor? Those against? As of it. The question is that I do report the bill as having passed committee stage without amendment. Those in favor? Those against? As of it. You have to report them individually. Members, we will now deal with the amendment to the Betting, Gaming and Lotteries Act. I do report that bill has having passed committee stage without amendment. Minister.
I beg to move for third reading of the bill, Mr. Speaker.
Do all three? Members, I do report the bill, an act to amend the Civil Aviation Act, as having passed committee stage without amendment. Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move for third reading of that bill.
Members, we know I do report the bill, an act to amend the Tourism Enhancement Act, as having passed committee stage without amendment. Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move for third reading of the bill.
The question is that the bill be read a third time. Those in favor? Those against? As of it.
A bill entitled An Act to Amend the Betting, Gaming and Lotteries Act, read a third time. A bill entitled An Act to Amend the Civil Aviation Act, read a third time, and passed. A bill entitled An Act to Amend the Tourism Enhancement Act, read a third time, and passed.
Mr. Speaker, the Minister of Finance will now take the corporate service. And they have to amend it?
Mr. Speaker, the International Corporate and Trust Services Providers Bill, which was passed in the Honourable House some weeks ago, has now been passed in the Senate, and a number of amendments have been made and tabled. And we are asking for the concurrence of the House and the approval of these amendments that have been submitted by the Senate.
House is in agreement.
I've asked for the approval, yes. We will need to approve it now. Yes. Yes.
Mr. Speaker, is not intended to do any further business for the day, so I ask for the House be adjourned until next Tuesday, July 18th at 2 p.m.
Adjourn. Order. There's a motion on the floor for the House to be adjourned until next week. Those in favor? Those against? Next week Tuesday at 2 p.m. This Honourable House now stands adjourned.